Have you ever wondered where the idea of the mermaid actually came from? Not the Disney version. Not the beautiful girl with a perfect tail sitting on a rock. I mean the original story. Who was the first person to look at the sea and imagine that somewhere beneath the waves, a woman with a fish's tail might be living there? And the strange thing is, the story is much older than most people realize. Long before movies, fairy tales, or even the word mermaid existed, people were already telling stories about beings that were part human and part fish. Thousands of years ago, the ancient Babylonians worshipped a mysterious fish-like god called Oannes. He was not a mermaid, and he wasn't even female, but he belonged to the same very old idea, that the sea might contain beings that looked partly human. Then, much later, in ancient Syria, we find something much closer to the mermaid we know today. Her name was Atargatis. She was a major goddess in northern Syria, and she was associated with water and fertility. Ancient traditions eventually portrayed her with the body of a fish. And this is where things get really interesting. A Greek historian named Diodorus Siculus, writing in the 1st century BC, told a story about a Syrian fish goddess named Derceto. According to the story, Derceto fell in love with a young man and had a daughter with him, but afterward, she was overcome with shame and grief. She killed the young man, abandoned her baby, and threw herself into a lake. And then, according to the legend, something impossible happened. Her body was transformed into that of a fish. The baby survived, thanks to a flock of doves that cared for her until she was discovered by humans. That baby, according to the story, eventually became Semiramis, one of the most famous legendary queens of the ancient Near East. Now, was this a real event? No. There is no historical evidence that a woman actually transformed into a fish. It's a myth. But that doesn't make the story unimportant, because myths tell us what people were afraid of, what they admired, and what they couldn't explain. And the sea was probably one of the biggest mysteries humans ever faced. Imagine living thousands of years ago. You stand on the shore and look out at an ocean that seems endless. You don't know how deep it is. You don't know what lies underneath it. You don't know what is waiting beyond the horizon. You hear strange sounds at night. You see animals appearing and disappearing between the waves. And sometimes, far away, you see something that looks almost human. What would you think it was? This may be part of the reason stories about mermaids survived for so long. But there's another interesting question. Did sailors actually see something and mistake it for a mermaid? There are several famous stories about supposed sightings. One of the best known happened in 1493. Christopher Columbus was sailing near the Caribbean when he wrote about seeing 3 mermaids. But he was disappointed. He said they were not nearly as beautiful as people had described them. Today, historians and scientists believe that animals such as manatees or dugongs could explain some historical mermaid sightings. And honestly, if you've never seen a manatee before, I can understand how a tired sailor looking at one from a distance might tell a very different story. But there is an important detail here. That does not mean every mermaid story came from someone seeing a manatee. Some stories were simply myths. Some were legends passed from one generation to another. And some may have been exaggerated by sailors who had spent months at sea. The truth is, we don't know exactly how every story began, and maybe that's part of what makes the mermaid so fascinating. Even the word itself is much younger than the stories. The English word mermaid first appeared in the Middle English period, around the 14th century. It literally comes from words meaning something like maid of the sea. By then, the creature was already becoming something closer to the image we recognize today. A woman above the waist, a fish below, sometimes beautiful, sometimes dangerous, and sometimes mysterious rather than evil. Medieval stories also began mixing mermaids with another ancient creature, the siren. And this is where things get confusing. The sirens from ancient Greek mythology were not originally mermaids. They were usually described as creatures with a woman's upper body and a bird-like form. Their famous weapon was their voice. They sang to sailors and lured them toward danger. Over time, European stories and artwork began changing the appearance of sirens. Eventually, the bird-like lower body became a fishtail, and the beautiful, dangerous sea woman we now recognize as a mermaid became much more common. Centuries later, writers gave the mermaid another transformation. In 1837, Hans Christian Andersen published his famous fairy tale, The Little Mermaid, and his story was very different from the Disney version. It wasn't simply a romantic love story with a happy ending. It was darker, sadder, and much more complicated. Then came Disney, and for millions of people, Ariel became the face of the mermaid. But the creature existed for thousands of years before Ariel ever appeared on a screen. So when I started painting this mermaid, I didn't want to paint a cartoon character. I wanted to imagine her as something much older, something that belongs to the sea, something that has been watching the moon from the water long before anyone gave her a name. That's why she's sitting here alone on the rock. She's not looking at a prince. She's not waiting for someone to rescue her. She's simply looking at the moon. And I like to imagine that somewhere in this painting, she knows something that we don't. Maybe she has watched ships disappear beyond the horizon. Maybe she has heard stories from sailors who never came home. Or maybe she is just another creature of the night, sitting quietly beside the water and watching the moonlight move across the waves. So, were mermaids ever real? There is no scientific evidence that creatures with a human body and a fishtail have ever existed. But the stories are real. The fear was real. The fascination was real. And for thousands of years, people have looked at the sea and wondered what might be hiding beneath it. Maybe that's why we never completely stopped believing in mermaids, because the ocean is still mysterious. We still haven't explored most of it. And somewhere beneath those dark waves, there are still things we've never seen. So perhaps the real question isn't whether mermaids were ever real. Maybe it's this: what else is out there that we haven't discovered yet?